We need to. I'd like to call the SEDA retreat meeting to order with roll call, please.
Board Member Van Gordon.
Here.
Board Member Weber.
Here.
Board Member Moe.
Here.
Board Member, Vice Chair Rodley.
Here.
Board Member Blackwell.
Here.
Chair Doyle.
Here.
Board Member Stout. Yep. And Board Member Leboff.
Excitedly here.
Thank you. So I guess we'll start with the first item on the agenda.
You all have a paper stack in front of you. We are gonna go to the stapled packet of paper and then the long one. This update is on the Glenwood project. Since we last discussed, the 3 tax lots on the easternmost side of the proposed future master plan area have canceled their agreement with the city. So the land use work and the future master planning work will move forward without those tax lots. The top page you have in front of you is representative of the future master planning area moving forward because of that.
Just point of information, can you hold up the piece that you're talking about so visually I'm tracking with you? Amazing, thank you.
You all have seen iterations of this map before. So just briefly, the orange are our participating private partner landowner. The green is city and SEDA owned property, and the yellow is the Homes for Good property. That ends up being about 22 acres total of land.
It's already in the city, correct?
I'm gonna get to that. Oh, Homes for Good, yes. On the next page of that packet, you'll see the concept that the SEDA board has reviewed in its preliminary stage and its more refined stage. That's this page right here. And then on the page after that, you will see a very rudimentary but helpful overlay of the street grid on the ownership of the property. And I included this for this update because I wanted to be able to communicate to the board that the way that the infrastructure is laid out in the concept is not greatly impacted, if at all, by the decision of the landowner on the east to not participate anymore. So besides a very tiny stub into that eastern portion of the property and some accommodations we can make to the street grid that are slightly on that landowner portion, the concept that you all have reviewed and helped to move forward so far can continue without participation of that landowner.
Okay, Holly, just for clarification, so that'll truncate there then?
Yeah, if you flip to the next. Yep.
Was that property now off the market?
I don't know its status.
Because we had an offer and we're out of the offering negotiating part, right?
I don't know what the landowner has decided to do with it yet.
Oh.
A brief time update for y'all. We're gonna go to the large sheet now. I called this kind of series of land use actions, our land use waterfall. It's a waterfall because we need to wait for one action to get to a certain point before submitting for the next. At the top of the page, you'll see annexation. This is the phase that we're in now. I expect an annexation decision to come to council sometime in April, which is great. As Board Member Moe pointed out earlier, the yellow piece of property in our ownership map is already annexed. The annexation application considers the green and the orange property on your ownership. At that point, after that decision is made, the entire property for the future master plan area will be annexed, which makes it easier for us to go through coinciding land use steps afterwards. Our consultant team from Rao Brokaw and Walker Macy are working on the zoning map and code amendments, which are the next 2 lines you'll see on your big schedule. We hope to have those submitted sometime in Q2 of 2025. And then we get to what I am referring to as our kind of like point of confidence or our line of confidence. That's the step on the worksheet called preliminary master plan. At the preliminary master plan step, we will have to have thought through all of the decisions around phasing of the development, commitments of infrastructure, and really think through like, how is this piece of land going to come to development in the future? I point out that step is kind of like a line of certainty because whenever we get to the point of submitting for preliminary master plan, we can start to think about design and engineering of infrastructure. Because this land use process is helping us put the pieces into play in the framework of the street grid, we are still a little bit early to be able to commit dollars to start to design like streets and stuff. But when we get to that preliminary master plan step, we'll have a lot more certainty around the streets and their future approval of being where we think where we say we'd like them to be, that we can start to invest in what it takes to build infrastructure. On this worksheet of steps, you'll see the final master plan, which is when we'll have total certainty over the future of the entitlements in that proposed master plan area. And then the final 3 steps on that worksheet, I just want to point out that those steps are not part of our master planner's scope of work right now, but I like having them included on this worksheet because they do demonstrate what it takes to get a piece of land to ultimate development potential. So these steps will still need to happen in some capacity. We don't have a current contract for them to occur under Ralph Brokaw and Walker Macy. But they give a better understanding of all the steps that are needed to get to the point where we are building buildings on these properties. I'm just going to check my notes very quickly. Okay. Any questions on the land use steps or any of the visuals you have?
Just another clarification question. The only property you said that was currently annexed is the one that's in yellow, the Holmes Creek property. Everything else is not annexed. That's including the private sector as well?
Correct. And that annexation application has been submitted and it's moving its way through.
Perfect. I've got a question.
Mhm.
So on the easternmost property that had come out of the master plan development area, when you look at the street grid, there is a slight sort of overhang for public infrastructure on both the east-west streets and the north-south street, whatever that street would be there. So are we gonna enter negotiations to buy that? Like, are we gonna essentially just sort of stub the east-west streets off at this point and then figure out like whatever the little run of land that right away we would need?
Right. So the east-west street will end at the SEDA owned property. We'll stub out. That little sliver, I need a better diagram from our master planning folks to understand how big the sliver that is. It could be small enough that we just scoot. This was, all of these lines are pretty,
High level?
yes. And we are still at a point with this concept that high level decisions aren't certain lines on a map yet. So I think we can accommodate for this little sliver.
Scoot is a very technical planning. She's just working that out.
Just one other piece of information for the board at this step. The city of Springfield owns the building on this front map, which is labeled 325 North Brooklyn. We refer to it as the Harvester Building or the Brownbaugh Building. It's the big red one that you can see from the other side of the river. We're currently undertaking a facilities assessment on that building. We don't know a lot about it. It's in a very special spot in this master plan area because it's so close to the river. Understanding a little bit more about the health of this building will give us a sense of if it can take improvements in the future. Any improvements or expansion to this building is challenging because of how close it is to the water. So we're just getting a sense of what's the usability of this building now. Does it have needs in the future? Is that a major piece of the vision for the future of this property?
Is that old Oregon art building you're talking about? Is that in part of that property, the floodway?
Various like greenway or flood boundaries, yeah.
Allie, when are bike paths discussed in this whole process?
Let's go to this sheet right here. Right now, as the concept is shown, the green area closest to the river is proposed to be a park. We are still working with our partners at William Lane to assure that that can happen in the future. I believe that our Glenwood refinement plan requires some sort of bike access whenever property is redeveloped. So that is intended to be part of this vision.
Wow, that is tiny writing there.
You know, and then just an update for the board on our current contract with Rao Roca and Walker Macy. That is a $911,000 contract. We are about 53% of the way through expending the funds. So we are doing good with commitment of our resources to get the work products that we need for the contract to proceed.
Any questions on Glenwood before we move on to talking how we're gonna spend our last hour together? Okay, so,
Sally.
oh, you have a question?
On the zip code issue, is that?
Neil's time to shine.
Yeah, we are in the process of doing our next push, which we think will include a public relations outreach portion. For those who may not remember, the zip code in Glenwood, as we all know, is a Eugene zip code. And our goal is to make that change to a Springfield zip code before development happens. So years from now, we're not looking back and going, wow, it's still Eugene. That includes work with the US Postal Service, and in the end, a survey that would go out to all residents and businesses in Glenwood, and we need to get 50% plus one to make that change. And then there would be some additional changes through the post office. The last time this happened, the surveyors, and it was a challenge, but it did not pass. But the US Postal Service made a mistake. And so that has ramped up our every 10 years try to we can try right now. So we want to do a full court press though, and really look under every rock, do everything we can, because this is really our chance to make it happen over the next 2 years. As Ally brings on a new staff person in legislative, one of that person's roles will be to help us kind of put together what does a push look like to really get this changed for good. And I think as Ally had mentioned, it has started to come up as we have those 3 hotels in Glenwood that are Eugene addressed hotels. The TRT for the last several years went to Eugene instead of Springfield. Ally's come back and fixed that, so that money will be coming back to Springfield, but that's how tricky it is. Even though everyone knows and they're doing the paperwork, there's still mistakes made, so. But, you know, on the big picture, it needs to say Springfield when we start building. Yes,
That post office survey, then why don't you go to property owners or voters?
it will go to property owners, yeah.
Should we do lunch before we get into?
Before we just want to level set on what we're going to talk about in the next hour when we get into the properties discussion. We're going to have a discussion around the bank property, the memorial building. There will be space to capture other work and interests that you all want to capture in it. And then we will talk about those work session questions around the timing of what we want to have, when we want to have those. So let's everyone just get up, grab lunch, come right back. We can pause for a We're going to start the properties portion of this discussion. We're going to kick it off with the bank property.
Yeah, so just to orient you all, the one handout we haven't discussed yet is two-sided. The orange properties highlight the properties that are SEDA owned, and you have a side for downtown and then a side for Glenwood. Just a reminder, and also to keep it all in one place for you, we might reference things based off of what they used to be or their address number. And this way we can all make sure we're talking about the same piece of property. I have on the agenda to talk about the bank property, but I want to give you just a little update on the status of certain properties. If we start on the Glenwood side, we just talked about the status of the Glenwood master plan area, but there's a little property across the way. Back in June, you all moved to put that property up for sale.
And
We are still working on something.
What do you mean?
We have had interest from one individual, and the offer I don't think is ripe to come back to SEDA. And I'm happy to, bring you back what we have on hand too. On the downtown side, moving left to right, the leftmost property, that's the L shape, you all moved in June to also sell that property. We've had some interest. Again, an offer not ripe to bring back to SEDA yet. The property just east of that is 236 and 240 Main Street. You all moved to lease those and we haven't received a letter of intent on those yet either. So just not ripe to come back to the board. What I'd like to talk to you today is where to point our energy for a focus for a downtown project. We have the bank building, which is between 4th and 5th. We have the Buick Land Assembly, which is at the corner of 7th and A. And we recently acquired or expanded those property areas to help to deliver new development to downtown. Those were strategic acquisitions using that four-corner philosophy of the best places that we could assure a successful development might happen. Now that we have these properties available to us, picking a focus would be really helpful so that we can move forward with some sort of vision or intention with property. When the Blue McKenzie project didn't happen, you all as a board said that those goals of the project were really valuable to you still, to bring market rate housing downtown, to increase densities downtown. So thinking about that as it applies to either one of those properties, we'll get to the last property as the next agenda item, the memorial building, but I would like to hear your thoughts on having the bank building be our focus moving forward.
When I look at this map, we've talked about development between, in the parking lot, between the Emerald Art Center and the museum, but that technically is a city-owned building, so it may be out of context in this conversation. So I guess my question is, how should we think about that work? Should we just sort of, separate it in our head, hey, that's what the city of Springfield does, and we're just talking about SEDA today, or are those that effectively the same resources that work in those two projects?
That's a really good question. I think they are slightly different, and here's why. The properties that SEDA already owns, you all can solicit development interest or whatever you would like to achieve with those properties. We have a developer interested in the city-owned property between the museum and the art center. So SEDA's role might be a little bit different. We're responding versus igniting. I think SEDA still will have a role in that property. Just don't know when the timing of it is yet. And timing of SEDA's properties and investments is really important because of how you all get your funding. You get funding from the tax base, from the maximum indebtedness, and thinking about taking on priorities, staging them in a way that allows us to borrow wisely and responsibly will be helpful whenever SEDA pursues a borrow so that we have access to capital to invest in a development. We pay interest on that money. So borrowing for certain projects in strategic lump sums will help us access money when market conditions might be good or bad. We can borrow what we need in 3 to 5 year chunks, borrow what we need again. And that's about the pace of when I see development projects taking downtown. So I'm thinking about the board's land opportunities or ownership in these like 3 to 5 year chunks of moving projects forward.
Okay, thank you.
I shared a lot more than what you asked.
No, I think you shared exactly what I was looking for. The second question is, when you think about downtown and you think about the North Glenwood property, like when we're sort of prioritizing areas, should we sort of consider the effort that is going on in North Glenwood, meaning like, can we have two, are we getting ourselves in the area where we're having two number one priorities here, or should we just treat them completely separately from a direction perspective?
That's a good question, and I'd like to stew a little bit more on that. The challenging thing with SEDA's properties and the point we're at with Glenwood is you all have demonstrated interest in keeping the project moving forward. A lot of the properties we own in downtown, we have this time frame that we need to work under to be successful for urban renewal plan. In 5 years, our property is supposed to have a plan, and in 10 years, we're supposed to be implementing that plan. So we are at the earlier stages of a lot of our properties, but we can't leave them unattended to for too long in order to meet those timeframes. So I think we're going to be balancing priorities between the two districts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So are you looking for ideas right now?
I am looking for, ultimately, I would like for the board to pick a focus so that we can focus our resources and our time on one of the properties that you currently own.
And we're proposing the bank building as that focus,
Yeah.
that property.
Yeah,
And
that's
we're not
probably-
talking specifics of necessarily what we want to use it, we would like to see it.
I
Or are you
think,
looking for
I
vision?
think we can.
Okay. Did you have some?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important to understand too, I was right on the tip of the tongue asking what the mayor's question was as well. I had that question on my mind. There is something to be said for knowing what investors are investing in and why, and who they're targeting their customer base at. And I think if we don't really understand what the city-owned property between the museum and the art center is going to do or propose to do, we would be putting our cart before the horse on this, property for the bank. The other property that also I have in question is the old library site. That's also a city-owned property, I assumed.
By the city, yes.
All right, so
Oh, wait, the old library site?
the one that's right next to Public House on the corner of A and Fifth.
Oh, yes.
Former Carver building.
Yes.
Yeah, right, so it's still city-owned. And then the property that's across the street from that is still Chambers owned. So there's a lot of pieces to this monopoly puzzle right here that would really indicate and motivate and dictate what our focus would be for the city block that we're looking at for the US Bank building. So there's a lot of questions I think are still unanswered for us to make a decision on that. If that's going to be our priority, then we need to, in my opinion, really look at what the other entities are doing and could join those for the best and highest return on our investment for that piece. And then the second question that the mayor had, are we going to have two competing interests, Glenwood and this, and is it going to drain the resources to where back in the government days, we spread the butter too thin and don't do anything really well and really timely? So at some point, maybe, and I'm just throwing this out as a, poison in the water thought, maybe the attention might be to shift from one to the other. In my opinion, I think downtown would be the priority one over pushing the Glenwood one at the same pace. Just a poison thought to think about.
Anyone else before I jump in?
Kind of along the same, I think information is important here. So we haven't really had any new information as far as that city-owned property, where we are in status with that conversation. Move forward, like we don't know anything about that. I think what that looks like influences the personality of our downtown's future.
And just a note, the council will be receiving an update on the museum lot project. I don't have a specific time frame in mind, but that is set to come back to you.
If we weren't appearing to stall on your request for us to move forward, I would say, based on what I'm hearing other members saying, that it would probably be good just to poke this US Bank property up in the market and just, interest, however we do that, however we publish that. I mean, Councilor Blackwell probably help us out with that. How we can put this interest out there for parties that would say, hey, this is available, we can be a partner, public player, just to get some people to the conversation and the table, I think would redefine and identify how those two would play off each other and then where our focus would go. I think we're still a little premature to say, oh, let's put a convenience store there and a 6-story parking garage. I think that's not gonna work, so.
No, I'm calling on you.
You're the chair. US Bank property is prime. It's, the infrastructure is already there. Pretty much. So you got streets, sewers, all that's already in the ground right now. To build that new, I know the city will probably make them rebuild it, but at this point, they don't. And then.
It's certainly, you're right, it's further ahead than starting the ground over across the river for sure, but I mean, any developer that takes up the infrastructure, based on experience, is pretty anemic in downtown, and there's gonna have to be some real improvements on that lot for sure.
If you want to go first, you can.
Oh, well, I would just like us to consider one thing that I've thought about for the use of that. That may or may not matter to the stuff around it, and that is, the compression that we're seeing on the other side of the river for, university housing. They're running out of space for students, and I think it would be a really interesting idea to start to shift people thinking more, it's only 2 miles away and we have this downtown and you could pay a little less because those are top tier pricing for those rooms for students and for student housing. And so I think that there's an opportunity to have a multi-unit complex with something below that caters to a more younger crowd, be it a like nail salon and stuff like they have over at the Amazon Corners or something. Cause I mean, I drive all the way from Springfield over to Amazon Corners because they have a spray tanning place and they have a, nail place and all that. So I'd like us to think about the opportunity that might be available with the college being so close and pulling those people east to get into our neighborhood.
So, yeah, I think if I had to choose a property to work on first, it would be the US Bank property. I think that's pretty clear. And frankly, the Buick sites, in the short term, we need that, those surface parking lots will give us a lot of flexibility as we sort of work our way forward. And, and I don't know if deprioritizing them is like, but to me, we want to keep them, but they're on the lower part of the list until we see some of this infill start to come in.
Yeah, I agree.
Just one comment on the US Bank property. I mean, it's designed as a suburban property. It's designed as a suburban pull through. It's designed as, a very car centric development. And I don't know what we have as SEDA, but to the extent that we can prioritize making it a more pedestrian friendly and a little bit denser of a development, I think would be a good thing for all of downtown Springfield. Just because we don't necessarily need the additional traffic. And it's designed like, hey, drive from here to there, but it adds a lot more in terms of traffic and everything else. Also, it also may score a point or two on our CFAC requirements. So just 2 cents.
Anything else on the bank property? You have what?
I think I'm all set. And maybe just a comment for member level. You had said something about poking at it, and I think, but you meant investing in understanding more about the hurdles and opportunities of the property to get it to a point where it can be something in the future.
No, not exactly. My sense of poking is to put it up, run up the flagpole and see if we get any takers. Because, talk always brings to the table invention and creativity and something maybe we hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I mean, obviously that's gonna come with challenges. I've been in downtown for a long time, so I know the challenges that they're gonna face and, the height and the way it's gonna work and, they can build a 90-foot structure there, but is that the best course of the building to put in downtown? Because it would shade the whole northern side of the street. So there's some, livability, applicabilities that we also need to think about too, how we want it to fit that piece in there, so.
That's helpful. I do see that being one of the first bits of focusing on a property, seeing who's interested, understand their vision for it, having more conversations with the board about.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, if somebody comes and has a great idea of rehabbing that US Bank building somehow and making it work, I mean, I don't know how they're gonna do that, but I mean, suppose they might,
We can start like interest conversations around.
Yeah, though, I mean, that was my first impression, but sometimes people come with some creative ideas and you go, well, okay, that works, who knows? And to Counselor Stout's comment about open spaces, synergetic pieces of downtown, there's like, you consider them as like modules, right? So you have like the downtown module that we are seeing the most activity is the 3rd and 4th Street module. And then the next module we'll probably work on is that a museum piece module. So is there open spaces enough for people to breathe and maneuver and celebrate and live and stroller with their kids and all of that kinds of stuff that we need to think about, how that all kind of plays into each other block by block.
Just more of a comment. One thing that I'm tracking just in general is I think the construction industry is always an indicator of our economy. It usually is where things will show weaknesses first. And so that's kind of, there's a lot of uncertainty right now with prices of goods, supply chain, all of that. So just want to make sure, there may be people that have some really great ideas for what they might want to see there, but they might be just waiting to see how these commodity prices play out.
Yeah, you're right, you're right. What's your official title? We call you, we don't call you by your first name. It's the county or the city administrator. Nancy, is that what we call you? I just want to make sure I get it right. But you're right. I mean, any project that we do is at least a 3 to 5 year project based on market availability and planning and all that. So things could change over the time when you start to the time you finish.
All right, we ready to?
I just have a question. Has there ever been any interest or thought of any kind of like hotel or boutique hotel in our downtown? No.
No,
Oh, yeah, no.
I've always like looked at that spot, I mean, not be doing what you do, but having some kind of boutique hotel that's right down to, visit our restaurants. And I know we have the ones in Glenwood, which is great, but I think something in our downtown corridor would be pretty amazing.
About 6 years ago, there was a plan on one for the corner of Pioneer Parkway.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
It's
Pioneer
a
Parkway.
4-story one we designed.
Mhm.
Pretty cool.
And it's fit, right? Similar to-
Well, it had team rooms in it because there's no hotel motel anywhere. They can have, like, you bring your volleyball team and the coach and 12 bunk beds. There's nothing like that. So we had a whole floor designed on that. So it would accommodate that for, teams that came in. It was a great idea. Then COVID hit. Then,
Well,
everything
for
was
like the
sideways.
trials, there's not a lot of places to stay and people came downtown because Springfield was the only one with restaurants like Tavern on Main that was staying open late enough for them to be able to venture out and eat. And it was very busy down there during that time, which is.
Yeah, a boutique hotel would certainly bring people down there in the evening for sure. Good idea.
Okay, so in the interest of time, you want to switch gears to the memorial building?
Yeah, so the Glenwood side of our map, all of our properties are accounted for in terms of their status. On the downtown side of our map, after having the conversation about prioritizing the bank and putting kind of next on the bench, the Buick Assembly, the board hasn't discussed a future for the memorial building. We get a lot of questions about it, and I think it would be helpful for some direction or intent for what you all would like to do with that piece of property moving forward. And I might tap into Neil for a little bit of context for this one.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Have time.
I believe as SEDA knows, the memorial building has been used for a warming site for the last maybe 5 years or so, pre-COVID and then during COVID and after. And just based on the regulations and the structure, we can no longer use it as a warming site. We shouldn't be, and the board has made that decision that next year will not be. And so just thinking about with that context, having some sort of plan, because I think if we get to next year and there is no warming site and that building is still out there, there will be some questions that we need to answer. While the building works really well for the warming site, that building is not long for this earth. I mean, it is falling apart as we have folks in there. So we really need to think about that as well. We had to put some money into it this year just so it could be a warming center. And almost every week, something else is happening. So while the building works technically really well for Egan, physically, it's not working well.
So then, with that in mind, what would be stopping us from spending the money on demolition and making that an empty lot? Where then it's even more primed for someone to purchase, because then they're not having to, what? Were you thinking the same? Okay, too. Because the cost of demo would probably be quite small, but what we could gain from that would be pretty significant.
Go ahead.
So I just want to be perfectly clear. Has it been declared unsafe by the fire department, and is there a big U outside?
No.
And is there any use at all? Can I set up a little office inside of there and rent it? Hypothetical.
Hypothetically, yes.
Okay.
I think what we're looking at is, you know, the thing that keeps it, the warming center, the boiler. I mean, that thing is like, we're keeping it alive.
Okay.
But the fire system, actually, we had to upgrade this year, so that's working really well.
So the building doesn't necessarily need a complete demolition as much as it has some major physical plant items that have to be replaced.
I think we'd have to get a structural engineer to say.
And the whole design of the building, have you been in there?
I have
Is-
not, but I understand how buildings from the 1960s and early years are designed and built, and that a lot of their problems and that sort of thing. But I think my 2 cents is, have we had any interest whatsoever outside of the warming center, but in anyone wanting to lease that building at all?
We have had some community members come forward. We had a tentative offer, which since the board hadn't discussed the intent of the building, I said, we'll come back to you if there's an opportunity for you to engage in purchase discussion. Back in November of 23, we had a development consultant look at that building and tell us, like, does it have opportunities that we're not seeing? It's a very purpose-built building, and in order to get it to the point where it would be usable by any tenant, kitchen, office, whatever, a substantial amount of investment would need to be made in a tenant improvement. So then we're weighing kind of the costs of new development versus the cost of a tenant improvement.
So what is approximately the cost of the tenant improvement that would be necessary to lease it out?
We didn't get that level of analysis because it would depend on the tenant.
And I think, like, my opinion here is, like, we tear it down.
Yeah, it's that bad.
The danger, and we own 2 or 3 buildings like this, that building, if we let it back out into the wild,
Yeah.
is not so bad that, you know, that somebody could limp it around for a while and we could be stuck with it the next 20 years. But not so good that we want it. It's like this Frankenstein building.
Exactly.
I would rather spend the money and sort of force the issue and, you know, make sure it redevelops.
Okay, I'm gonna go on the other side of the coin on that. To rebuild that building is gonna be $30 million, to rebuild something that size. So to rehab that building is gonna be a whole lot less. Now, I have heard a lot of folks, and I agree, it's a Frankenstein. I have no question, I'm on your page. However, if you tear that building down, I know Jenna's gonna be in my ear, no, I'm kidding. But there's been some creativity, some creative thinking around that building that could be done. So if we wanna press the issue, perhaps we look at selling the building with the caveat that we have covenants that are attached to it. That it, you know, we have a Frankenstein clause in it, if you will, that it has to be up to a certain standard. But, you know, to rebuild that building or to level it, and then we could be stuck with a vacant lot for 20 years.
That's.
And then what do we do? I mean, you know, ultimately, if you wanted to clean it, the suggestion would be, if I was on board, would say, we scrape it, we make a paid parking lot and we cover it and it's clean and it's not just dirt and lumpy like we're looking at A and Fifth and all those other properties.
Well, I think we also have to consider, this isn't just some corner lot somewhere. Like, there is a property immediately across the street and to the side that we also own
Right.
that already had plans and had a vision. So it's not like this couldn't be, once leveled, become a parking lot or become something that could work with those. That's all I would say.
Well, it's 2 lots. I mean, we own both of them, right? We own that little park section and the building lot, right? Yeah. Again, I mean, Councilor Blackwell, help me out here.
Well, I was
Real
thinking,
estate
why
wise,
wouldn't we put it up for sale? Instead of demoing it and having a lot, why wouldn't we go that route first and see if we can generate interest on it? I mean, I have a little mad love for the building because of just living here my whole life and, you know, middle school dances and lots of memories, and a lot of people do, they have a lot of love for it.
Let's go to Michelle and then to Steve.
So for me, this building has a lot of similarities to the old administration, the school district's old administration building, which is falling down around itself. I think if we're gonna consider selling it, I think we spend the money on a structural analysis first. Or do some sort of like, we need to know what the building is capable of. If that's if that's kind of the consensus of this group, I think we need to spend some money finding out what that building really is. You know, if it's got asbestos, like all the things, and structurally, I just don't see how that building is gonna survive it long term.
Counselor Blackwell, in your experience, like, that's a good question, but I'm wondering, like, Is that the responsibility of the seller? Is that the responsibility of the buyer to do their
Coming
due
from
diligence?
residential.
I know,
side,
but so-
Normally, we would not go there until there was an offer on the table, and then it would be the buyer's the buyer's expense and time to
So I
get their
think we
inspection.
decide on if that's a path we decide on, we need to put a time frame around that. Like, we're not gonna leave it out for sale for, on the for sale block for 3 years. Like, what is the timeline? How quickly do we want to, get interest in it and then move on?
I think that's a good idea, because if it's costing us money, and if it's sitting there costing us money every year, what, I mean.
And we paid $850 for that, if I recall, originally when we bought that years ago.
Closer to 6,
Huh?
something between 6 and 7, I think.
Well, I mean, the way to sell it fast is to make it attractive. And if you're looking at wanting to have a really great creative idea, we offer on the market for 300,000. And people come and we figure out what they want to do with it, and we establish covenants. You have to have a structural report. You're gonna do that. I'm sure there's asbestos in there. You're absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so I mean, that, LRAP is gonna be on that like a, dog on a bone, so.
And I guess just to be clear, our goal is to drive, assessed value, right? So somebody buying the building and not putting any money into it
And letting
and
it
just,
sit there.
right, so it turns into what the old modern studio turned into with broken windows or the 525. That's not good for anybody.
Right.
And that's why I'm kind of in the like Jenna could convince me, I'm not that far locked in. But that's why I'm in the boat of, if we can't figure out how to make somebody redevelop it, like, it would be better than it'd be straight.
Yeah.
And if it was like the old Cottage Grove Armory, right, right, the kind of service, but it had sort of better bones, it was less
Yeah.
Frankenstein-y, right? Like, that could have been like, I could get to the Cottage Grove Armory vision, but those buildings are two-door.
That building also had a group of people really, really passionate about preserving it.
Yep.
Really passionate about preservation.
Yes.
You remember when Willamette Lane decided to move out of there and put it up for sale? There were some interesting parties out there that we heard of. We did not want them in there, and that's why we jumped on it so fast. And it was Salvation Army, some of those.
I mean, what's great is SEDA's in the driver's seat on this. I mean, like I said, if we mandate a sale on that at a really great rate, we can mandate the development parameters for it too. Based on the sale, you will do X by X number of days. We can do that. And then if we don't get a taker and we don't do it, then we go to Plan B and make it a parking lot.
Because it's like incentivizing somebody to come in and buy it for that price, because they're gonna put the money into and then have a schedule, and again, if it didn't sell and nobody agreed on those terms by a certain year, then Plan B.
Right. And it limits our expenses in that too. We've already expended, those are sunk costs already. They're off the budget at $600,000 or $800,000. And if we're only giving them basically, for on paper's sake, a $300,000 or $400,000 incentive, then we've done our part as the board. But we still can contractually control what goes on.
Fire sale the strings.
I think we know we'll hear from Jenna on this for sure. I mean,
I just texted her.
She will. We will hear from Jenna, and I always appreciate her coming and sharing her knowledge around those historic, Jenna Fribley.
Oh,
I mean, I always appreciate her knowledge and her passion for saving historical buildings. I mean, I would be interested to hear what kind of a vision she sees for that building, right? I mean, maybe she has some great idea that I can't, my brain.
Started
won't
with
go there.
green, it would look better. I mean, let's
Yeah,
make it.
I mean, the building is off, right? It's ugly. Needs some help.
What? Go ahead.
If we were to go to sell this, regardless, phase 1 would be required. Am I correct? Phase 1 environmental?
Yeah, you'd have to get it. Asbestos, yeah.
In the past, SEDA has done our own phase 1 upon acquisition. I don't know if we would want to do one for potential buyers or have potential buyers do one prior to
Do
acquisition.
we have one on record now from?
No, we don't.
Their financial
Actually, I don't know.
institution would require they do certain.
Good question.
Right, but I guess, when's the last time we did one on this particular property?
Typically, we do them before we buy them. I need to look to see if we have any file.
I'd just be really interested to know what the general summary of that phase 1 would be.
Yeah.
Only because, I'm in the process of buying another property. I think that would give us a nice indication of really what are the environmental concerns, what are the asbestos concerns, and actually understand this property a little bit more, because if we're going to drive assessed value, actually by eliminating that parking lot or turning that into a parking lot would actually lower the assessed value of the property immediately adjacent to it. It would also lower the value of the post office and the other and the Buick dealership and the ones along Main Street. So I would have a strong push against
Why?
leveling that.
Why would it do that?
Because, yeah, okay, we're assessed on land value and also the improvements on the property, remember all?
Wouldn't affect the others.
What I'm saying is if you're adjacent to just nothing but parking lots, you don't have the same comps on it, do you?
No, it's not.
Well, no, I mean, if you're adjacent to a falling down building.
Right, exactly.
Right, and I think that's maybe where I'm questioning how falling down are we really talking about? It's because there's such a range of different things.
You really do.
Remember, Stout, I'll also note that typically phase ones don't include lead or asbestos analysis. You need to do a different sort of analysis to capture those.
Yes, sir.
Might I just make a suggestion in the direction? I know a couple of the folks that have been interested in buying that building, and they've talked to me directly. And so I would suggest maybe the SEDA board looks at selling this building for a fire sale price with conditions and see if those interested parties come forward with the necessary accoutrements to make something positive happen there.
That's I like that idea, but.
With the timeframe, because if.
Yeah,
they don't,
exactly,
then
with the
let's tear it
timeframe.
down and.
100%.
Yeah, and-
By like June 1.
Let's have a reasonable time frame. Obviously, we've been looking at it a long time and we're a little bit jittery about getting it out of our sight, but you know, realistically and reasonably, 18 months.
I would say, tell me more, there 18 months to get it done or 18?
No, 18 months to get it pan through, have a seller come through, we meet, I mean, government moves at the speed of molasses, right? How many meetings are we gonna have to actually put down some covenants of what we want and expect there? That we have a reasonable educated opinion on what the return on the investment in our downtown is gonna be, what we really want that to be, what the customer base of that would be, what the use of that would be. I mean, there's a lot of things that could really drive the momentum further in our downtown development if we have a very specific covenant system to what we think that building would work and have a private partner to help us.
I'm a little concerned that the building will degrade too much if we let it sit another winter. Even if we are en route to some sort of sale.
Yeah.
So you're saying 9 months, you'd like to get it sold by the end of the year and some plan in
At least
place?
have somebody committed.
At least
I'd love to see that. Can we
give us
move that
9
fast?
months to find out if there's even interest, because you're saying there is interest, but what does that interest look like and how serious are they?
Cause I hate to get 18 months down the road and then
Might
have
depend on
people back out
the
like fall apart like Blue McKinsey.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this is a valid path to go down, right? So but I think it's also this question of, do we all agree on what we want that building to be, right? It staying in its current condition doesn't help us. And how much more money, since it's in the urban renewal zone, is a proposal gonna come back and essentially ask SEDA to jump in for it? Even if we start off with the fire side sale, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've got that we're not gonna be 10 or 15, they're not gonna come back and ask us for 10 or $15 million to, renovate that building.
You'll know that right away. You'll know that within the time frame I think you put out on the table.
And then like, how long do they have to have it deliver it? Like you could give me the yes if, I'm not held up on the sale price. I think it's how long does it sit out there? Is it actually gonna, get to a point where it moves from its current wonderful condition to something that is, the gem of downtown. And it's gotta still overcome, it's still even at its best shape. That is a weird building, right? Like,
It's really kind
right,
of.
like.
They can make it weird and good. Okay, now,
Hold on.
oh, sorry.
I'll just note that process that you're talking about, Member Van Gordon, that is what we will need to do on the bank. It's not a small undertaking. By putting a time frame to the memorial building, we're essentially saying this is our priority over anything else. Is that where the board wants to dedicate its time and resource?
See, now I'm back to Liz, let's tear it down and sell it.
we
Focus
know-
on the US Bank.
If we tear it down, do we know what that cost is? And how fast does that move?
Depends on how fast Steve.
I mean, are we stuck in the same 9-18 months anyway?
Yeah, no, it'd be way faster than that, I would think, yeah. It's just not something we've got to resolve this year, and we're talking like before October, at least have some sort of a decision, because that's when we're gonna start dealing with the, folks with Egan and all of that. So that's why we're talking about like getting something moving on this. I think, I may be speaking.
Well, that's part of it. And if it's for sale, I mean, I think we can say we can't have any activity inside the building for sale. So I think that's, we can resolve that, but I just, every time I go check my mail, I look at that building and I'm just.
Well,
Yeah.
Mayor Van Gordon said something that was pretty good. He didn't really care what the price was when we sold the building. So here's another idea. We sell the building for $1. It's off our table. We have a covenant with, it's not a SEDA project anymore. It's a private partnership project. We've partnered with the private industry to say, hey, here's $1 property. You give us the best idea. We sell it on the market as diamond in the rough, way to come down and redevelop and be a part of downtown Springfield. Bring us your best ideas and we'll take the best three and decide.
That's really cool.
I mean, if you don't care, because that's where you're gonna get someone who's like, all right, I'll take on the boiler, I'll take on the asbestos, I'll take on the structural. Everybody takes on, we're out of the picture.
Serious flippers here.
Please, let me caveat that, like, I am not, like, Jenna would have to convince me that we wanted that building long-term, and I'm not acknowledging, like, I'm sort of acknowledging that there could be an idea out there that you go, oh, that's amazing, right? I just don't, like, we just don't know. So if we get past that question, I would be fine with that, with the right covenants around it, right? About how long they can sit on it, when do we get it back, right? Maybe there's a cap on how much more, SEDA money that we have that is available, right? Because if we give it to them for $1, we just don't, we don't have enough resources to develop all these properties and put,
That doesn't become our priority. We just, at $1, then it's you. All we do is contractually mandate it.
If you don't give it a facelift by 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, if you contractually mandate it,
Bulldozing it.
Yes,
but like, but
we're all taking a turn.
it's gonna take them at least 3 months to get you a design and a site plan.
yeah, I think,
Easily.
like, I'm not, in the grand scheme of things, I think we're hearing two things. One of them is US Bank before this, right? Like, I'd rather sit on this for another year and make progress on the US Bank, US Bank property. But this dollar plan could be a really good.
We don't have to sit on it. Somebody else is working on it while we're working on US Bank. We can do two things at
Yeah,
once essentially.
I think the thing we have to figure out in that scenario, and I'm really curious here, and I think I could get there, is like, what do we agree on those covenants are? Right, like, those next set of questions are actually the thing that matters a lot, like, who's grading the proposal, how long do they have to have, like, what's all that stuff?
So may I suggest that
You're running the
if
meeting.
we were to go down that path, would it be an idea to have a small subcommittee of 2 or 3 people that meet, that kind of outline what those covenants would be to bring back to the board and say, here's our idea?
Sure.
People that maybe have a little more knowledge about real estate than others. So if that's a thought.
That actually feels like a very good place to pause and ask, can we stop on this topic here? Because we won't have enough time to really sink our teeth even further. But is that a good place to capture this? Do you want to have anything tangible coming out of this?
Yeah,
Is
I'd
that
like
the
to
next
hear
step?
back what have we made kind of a plan?
Yeah, I've heard a mixture of things, but the last point was to have a fire sale on the building. With terms attached for certain outcomes that the board would like to see and timeframes attached to it, is that right? The timeframe informs, if the timeframe passes and nobody bites, does the board agree that the building gets demolished?
We agree to revisit it.
I don't, if the time frame elapses and this idea is a bust, I'm in the demolished category.
Absolutely
Right, like,
demolished.
So this is something that we can bring back to the board, this proposal of list for sale with favorable price, and then a discussion on the vision for it. That's what we can bring back to the board in regular session for y'all to discuss and vote on.
So just advertising brain here thinking, can we make this a public relations,
Please.
a boom? Put a sign out there,
Yeah.
save it from demolition. If you have the greatest idea, this is what we're gonna do. I mean, really make this some sort of, bring some excitement to the table and people solving I mean, lack of a better word, a turd problem.
It'd be really cool.
Yeah, see,
Get some excitement around it.
Well, let's not call it a turd publicly.
Are we public? We're in work session, right?
No, we're in a public meeting.
I retract that motion. I just made.
I think the other question when we bring it back, and maybe this is a question, you know, for Nancy to help us with the context of this, right? Like, we can't clone staff, right?
Right.
What is reasonable in this whole thing that we can execute in a time frame that makes some sort of sense, right? Because we need to make, you know, if we have to snap the line and wait on things, right? There's projects I hear we want to push faster.
That's why the subcommittee idea, I think is a good idea.
I like the subcommittee idea. I think it's a
That way
good
we
call.
can act as staff in the interim to take some of that time.
I think that's a great idea too, and I think the capacity thing is really important because we keep saying that the US Bank is a priority and we want to do all of these things and somebody's gonna do it. And just the sort of the flip side of the PR thing is that means a lot of people paying attention and being invested and having opinions. And so if we end up demolishing it, then it's turned into a big public shit show of people. Yeah, so just like, if it went really great, sure, escalated, but excuse me, Fred show, whatever. So it's like, yes, if it went really great and it went like lovely, but if it doesn't, as things tend to slow down and get stagnant or whatever, then we've got a lot of people saying, you promised you were gonna do this thing.
That's true. You turn it into a save then it can't be
And
saved.
it doesn't get saved.
Right.
Then
Then we're.
Any other comments on this one before we pivot? I'm gonna close us out for a few more things. One, we also wanted to capture, and we won't get into discussion around these ideas, but if there's other worker interest to incorporate into this project, now's a good time just to
For
kind of.
SEDA in general,
Yeah, I'm wondering if is this where that would fit in, this part of the discussion?
That's
Oh,
around
okay.
this next one. Yeah.
the two items I think we've got to talk about is we have to continue to lobby the Wayne County Commission to close the transfer site.
Sorry.
Yep.
That has been our position for 20 years and
I was wondering why that wasn't the state of the city this year. I didn't hear that.
because the city manager intervened and said, you can't publicly call out the county. I'm like, I didn't name them. That's not very nice to say it. So I'll say it privately. The second thing is there's a commitment that the county commission made probably 5 years ago about infrastructure in Glenwood and support for Glenwood.
I checked that.
We've got to figure out how to reconvene and, you know, get on the same page about that, because we're gonna need those dollars.
So can I make a request that whatever official paperwork you have, I need? Because I ran that down and the response I got was not favorable. It was like, we didn't make anything, right? You know, we hands up. So if there's anything that's documented, I would love to have it.
Yeah, well, I think there's documents floating around, but, and if we need to, we'll come up with former county commissioners who will claim to have been there at the time.
Perfect. Hey, I'm going to go back for you for sure. I think it's a great idea.
What else would you add to the list?
Oh, no, I was just trying to get people back towards you.
Any other worker interests to incorporate into this?
Sure. Just one, which is, in terms of walkability, revisiting the discussion of a two-way main street, I think is just worth revisiting. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but if at some point this year we revisited it, I know the staff created a report back in 2010, which is 15 years ago now. And I think many of the things and the assumptions and other information that was true at the time is not necessarily true today.
There's an ODOT component to that, is that right?
I can't remember exactly, but I think it's just a report that's worth working on, at the very least within a work session, to say, this is worth paying attention to, and especially as it relates not only to downtown's SEDA portion, but also down to Glenwood's SEDA portion. These things are so inextricably linked to each other. So that's my 2 cents, is that we should revisit that. And we don't have to go forward with it. I'm certainly not gonna insist on it, but it's just, we should look at it.
What else do you want to add to the list? Okay, so the last item on the agenda, there's some questions in front of you, and I think the most realistic thing to do at this point is discuss when you would revisit or when you want to visit these questions and have a discussion around it.
We'd like to put this on our agenda review and talk about when we could. Where did this come from?
I made this question.
Gordon Level.
The background of this, if I may, Chair. I was meeting this last week with some consultants from Seattle. They had tracked down a rumor that there was a town in central Oregon, or not central Oregon, but southern Willamette Valley that was doing really well, and they were excited, and they looked up Springfield and started doing some homework, and somebody's name kept popping up, so they decided to call and come down from Seattle for a visit. So we had a tour of that last week, and these are some of the things that those folks who had done Redwood City, Yuba City, they've done a lot of consulting like that. And they, myself and them were looking at downtown and what's going on, what's been done. And these are some of the questions that we talked about that they had. They've also availed themselves to an hour work session with them for free to have our questions answered and to see what kinds of things they think we could do here and to accelerate our developments in downtown. So I offer this out and put these questions out just for something that we would, the way we make our decisions, if we can hone ourselves down to who we're really making those decisions for, I think would make our decisions a little more accurate. So that's why I put this together for you.
I would be in favor of like deferring this to the board leadership for at their agenda review to talk about what to do with this.
And with that offer.
They're super stoked. I think that we're doing a great job down there.
All right. Kelly, any other topics? You got what you needed?
Not too much.
Good, so we over.
Anyone volunteer to be Alex's assistant for the next 3 months?
Exceeded expectations. Okay, Mayor, anything you want to add before we?
We have to officially close the
Yeah.
SEDA meeting.
So I'd like to go ahead and close the SEDA retreat meeting for today.
Okay. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Now that we're out of all the meetings, I think we'll, obviously Nancy's gonna take some of the stuff away and get back to us. And we'll probably revisit this again in February and do this retreat. Some boards do it twice a year. I don't know, think about that. I don't think we need it, but I think coming back in February and revisiting some of these topics would be helpful. I appreciate it being here on a Saturday, especially the staff that came in on an extra day to hang out with us.
Thanks, whoever got lunch. Appreciate that.
For reaching for food.
Yes. For staff, thank you, staff.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, just one other comment, if we can overall have like a standing, so we're not like kind of trying to figure it out, like, hey, it's the second Saturday or the first Saturday of whatever month, both for our state of the city and our busy time of the retreat, that might be helpful in terms of calendaring for next year. So we have this is what we're going to do, unless somebody's really mad about that. So that's all. Thanks.
Right.